Hi everyone, thank you for being there so early. So I'm Alexandre Clement and I'll start here. I'm the product owner of Fizzy.taxa, which is a parametric, I'll come back on that later, flight delay insurance with automatic compensation of the customers in case of delay. We are using the blockchain in order to register transparently all the data used and processed to resolve the contracts. So today, first, I'll go over what's parametric insurance on a few words, because I guess all of you are very knowledgeable on the blockchain, but maybe less on that side. And my goal is to explain why parametric insurance is actually a great fit for smart contracts on the blockchain. Then we'll do a short overview of Fizzy.taxa, our product, and then see how we think we could improve this product in a blockchain environment. So parametric insurance is basically, according to the World Bank, a product for which insurance pays out benefits for the loss of assets or investments based on a predetermined index for the loss of those assets. So on contrary, traditional insurance relies on the assessment of the damage done. So very quickly, how does it work? First, we need to predetermine a compensation for a given loss. It's usually smaller than through traditional insurance. Then we need to find a parameter that correlates well with this risk and a threshold above which the risk is considered materialized. So you have a few examples here. For commercial property, we could do fire or flood insurance with the parameter being the height of the water. For crop insurance, we could do something like a certain number of days of drought. For airline companies, it could be volcanic eruption, for instance. So if the parameter reaches the threshold, we know we should compensate because the risk actually happened. So it seems quite easy like this, but it's actually quite hard to set up because it's directly dependent on the availability and accuracy of historical data for us to be able to modelize the risk, and also on the availability of live data. It doesn't mean, though, that the process is automatic and claimless. In most cases, the customer will still have to notify its loss and ask for its compensation. Still, it's considerably easier for insurers to check one threshold for one given index than to assess all the damages, which means that in a catastrophic event for the customers, they will get basically their compensation a lot faster through this type of products than through traditional insurance. And just a few figures to give you an idea why parametric insurance is an important factor for insurer. In the last years, the share of claims related and payouts from insurers related to catastrophic events has been doubled by almost 3 in 10 years. So this kind of product is considered a driver for growth and stability in a lot of regions where it could provide a first injection of cash after a catastrophic event, for instance. Why are smart contracts a great fit? First, parametric insurance relies on an immutable set of parameters that defines a risk. And then the monitoring of a threshold that actually states the risk happened. With the smart contracts, you can make sure that there are no hidden rules inside the code, no exclusions, no small lines at the end of your contract, and that the pre-purchase agreement is strictly enforced. The execution is also automatic, and with cryptocurrencies, you can have your indemnity in minutes. And coming back to Fizzy, so if some of you haven't seen it yet, it's basically a website in which you can get a quotation for a given flight in a few clicks. You just input your flight details. So this is the part where all the data science happens, because we are able to price each flight independently, depending on its risk of delay. And then the interesting part, at the moment of your subscription, we will write all the parameters of your policy on the smart contract, including the time of arrival that will trigger the indemnity. And at flight landing, we will use the smart contract to provide the actual landing time, do the comparison between the actual and scheduled landing times, and take the decision whether we should compensate or not. So at the moment, this comes back to our backend to trigger an indemnity or not. But what we would like to imagine is to have Fizzy in an integrated Ethereum environment. And this is what it could look like. The first step would still be to have the customer coming to an AXA website in order to identify himself. We could have a blockchain service providing us this, but it still would have to go through AXA for identifying our customers, which is a regulatory requirement. Based on the customer's flight detail, we would provide him with the pricing, and if he accepts it, we would sign a transaction that the customer would then be able to send directly on its own to our smart contract. So the signature of the transaction guarantees that the customer cannot change the terms of his contract because everything is written down, the indemnity, the premium, the flight and the scheduled time of arrival. And once this policy is registered in our smart contract, the smart contract itself would autonomously get the time of arrival from an on-chain service provider that would, from his smart contracts that would communicate with ours. And once he has this time, he could take the decision to compensate or not the customer directly through a transfer of Ethereum tokens. So now, what do you think is the most interesting part? How to improve Fizzy in the coming years? First of all, cryptocurrency payments is not yet a reality. It's actually quite complex to enable those with the regulatory framework we have for insurance. The first thing we have to take into account is the total exposure. In insurance, the exposure is what we could lose if all the policies, all the flights, in that case, that we are currently covering, landed late. Which means we would have to reimburse all, to compensate all the current policies. And we have to define what is the maximum value we could lose in case all flights would be late. So in order to initialize this contract, we first need to provide a pool of ethers, like let's say around 100 ethers. And this is the exposure we agreed to cover in total. If someone buys a policy, if someone buys a policy, here is, the pool will decrease by the amount of the compensation we will offer in that case, and the premiums will be stored in another wallet. The amount of taxes also has to be stored independently for us to be able to withdraw it at any time. The taxes on insurance products that AXA owes to the regulator. If a policy closes and there is no compensation, the value of the potential compensation we could have sent is provided back inside the pool, and it's unblocked for someone else to book a policy with it. If the policy closes, but there is a compensation, the amount is effectively removed from the pool and sent to the customer, leaving us with a new exposure available of the amount left in the pool, plus the premiums paid by the users. And so this might seem like a simple solution, but it's actually quite hard to respect all the constraints of the regulator for an insurer in that case. And now moving on to the next topic where we would actually like your help, discussing the value of the oracle. And on social networks, it's actually one of the points where we are getting the more challenge, and hence we would love to have your opinion on this. So for Fizzy, the oracle is the guy providing us with the times of arrival of the flights. The first solution is what we have today. where we register the data in the smart contract. As the data is publicly available, and as the customer is supposed to be on the flight, he can match the data we used in the smart contract with what he experienced or what he can find online through different other sources. This is very cost effective. This is rather transparent, even though it relies on the customer verifying each flight independently. It's also very scalable and efficient for the handling of edge cases, because no data provider is perfect and you will always have inaccuracies or gaps in the data. So as I said, the issue is that it's really based on individual verifications. What we've been requested a lot to do would be to get the data via an oracleization of the external data provider, which means paying a third party to authenticate our call to this flight data provider and saying that it does come from this guy and it hasn't been changed in the middle. The issue is that it's not very cost effective, because the cost of authentication compared is almost more than 10% of the basis price of our policies. And also the handling of edge cases is a lot more complex, because you will directly get the data, even if it's inaccurate, transferred to your smart contract. A third solution would be to have the data provider directly on-chain with a smart contract. So this would remove the additional cost, but still leave us with the issue of handling edge cases. And also one major issue is that this still does not exist, or very few data providers are actually working on that today. But as we are on stuff that doesn't exist, maybe the fourth solution would be the most perfect one, which would be a distributed on-chain data provider. It means someone who would cross-reference data from different data providers, like the one we use plus others, but also maybe users using their GPS position through the smartphones, etc. And it would also necessitate for them to display their recipes. I mean, by that they should really explain how they take the decision of showing one data instead of another, depending on the different data sources they have behind. And to us, this would be the best solution, even though it's still possible if we get data from the users for them to cheat. And if you have any questions and remarks on this, we would be delighted to discuss that with you. Maybe if one of the 4 points doesn't make sense, but to have your opinion on what we should do and how we could improve this oracle on FISI. Or maybe one of the points wasn't clear enough, I don't know.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. Regarding the oracleization, that's the price you've seen with Oraclize, or have you looked at other services like Chainlink or predictive oracles?
So what we've looked at was always around 50 cents per transaction to identify the data source. But I think 50 cents is the price for Oraclize specifically.
Okay. Well, I don't really know the price for the other project, but personally, I think oracleization is still maybe the best fit, even if it has a cost, because you suggest solution 4, but I guess without a strong IoT connected directly on the blockchain, you can still have misleading information, people trying to corrupt the system or trying to impact it. Also, you need to have a pool of people, I guess, and not necessarily everybody. I mean, people are interested in insurance. I was working in insurance, but it's not like when they land, the first thing they will do is to check their insurance contract. You know, they want to go on the holiday and just don't care. You know, well, that's what happened today with normal insurance. So maybe tech-savvy people would do that, but the most common people we just don't care. Also, for other solution in oracles, you can use different. I mean, you can have a pool of data provider. Either it's like FlightStat, FlightRadar, 24, whatever, and you can make an average or even like Libor, you know, when they calculate the Libor rate, you remove some extreme value. I mean, that's some, I guess, hints to make the contract a bit more decentralized. Because I guess solution 3 is pretty difficult to do, on-chain data provider.
I mean, to me, solution 3 is rather easy because the data provider just has to push a smart contract that makes a link directly between him and the blockchain. And just coming back to the first solution, to me, it relies a lot more on aggregating different data providers than on users that would be maybe here just to, see if you have any edge cases or if there's something wrong, but as of today, it's maybe one of the parts we had to work the most on Fizzy, as we want to compensate automatically based on the time of arrival. We have to make sure the data is as close to the experience of the user in the plane. And even with one data provider, this is a lot of logic and automation because they, of course, never provide or sometimes provide a very precise data, but they also have estimated data, etc. So you have to have some logic to take the best one. And also you don't know what is the actual data source they've used behind that. Maybe it's the airports, maybe it's an ADB system that's live for most of the continents, but not for all. Maybe it's directly from the National Organization for Air Traffic. And to me, the value of the force would rely on the fact that he would explain why he would take one data over another because of the accuracy of the data source. And I think that is something we're ready to pay for, and an additional value to pay for it. We're ready to pay for that.
About the source of the data, the external data, do you onboard airports, data from airports to your solution?
So the data provider we use already aggregates several sources, including airports. And depending on the place on the planet where it comes from, data from airports can be the most accurate, but not in all cases. So nobody has a fifth solution we never thought about. Okay, thank you, I guess. Have a good day.